A school bus carrying 47 children never arrived at its destination, leaving an entire community in panic. But 6 months later, a drone operator filming wildlife discovers something that makes his blood run cold. The autumn air carried a crisp chill in Oak Ridge, Oregon, as dawn broke over the small town nestled in the majestic Willamette National Forest. Golden and crimson leaves drifted lazily from towering maples, creating a picturesque tapestry against the morning sky. For the residents of this close-knit community, Wednesday mornings followed a comforting rhythm of familiarity and routine. In the Williams household, 10-year-old Sarah sat at the kitchen table, her dark fingers wrapped around a glass of orange juice, while her mother, Deborah, quizzed her on multiplication tables for the day's math test. 9 times 7? Deborah asked, adjusting her nurse's badge while simultaneously buttering a piece of toast. 63, Sarah answered without hesitation, her bright eyes shining with confidence. Mathematics had always been Sarah's passion, her hand invariably the first to shoot up during class. Deborah smiled proudly, leaning down to kiss her daughter's forehead. "You're going to ace that test today." She gently adjusted Sarah's favorite red coat, ensuring it was properly zipped against the October chill, before handing her the Avengers lunchbox packed with a carefully prepared lunch. Just a few blocks away, 8-year-old Emily Thompson twirled across her kitchen in pink ballet shoes and a practice tutu, her blonde hair swinging in perfect rhythm with her movements. Her father, Mark, dressed in a crisp suit for court, recorded the impromptu performance on his phone. "Your mom is going to love seeing this," he said, smiling as he captured Emily's graceful spins. "She'll be so proud when she sees how much you've improved since last week's class." Emily beamed, executing one final pirouette. "I can't wait to show Miss Patricia today after school." Mark glanced at his watch and lowered his phone. "You're going to miss the bus, Princess." He handed Emily her pink backpack adorned with silver stars, then kissed the top of her head. "Have a great day and knock 'em dead at ballet." At 7:20 sharp, the yellow school bus number 17 pulled up at the corner of Maple Street, where a cluster of children already waited, breath visible in the cool morning air. Frank Donovan, the 62-year-old driver with neatly trimmed gray hair and an immaculate uniform, opened the door with a practiced movement. Parents waved from driveways and porches, receiving Frank's warm smile and familiar wave in return. "Good morning, Mr. Frank," Sarah called out cheerfully as she climbed aboard, immediately making her way to sit beside her best friend, Olivia Reeves. The bus continued its route through the sleepy streets of Oak Ridge, collecting children at each designated stop. Emily boarded at the final pickup point, skipping down the aisle to join her third-grade friends, her ballet bag clutched tightly alongside her backpack. Inside the warm confines of bus number 17, 47 children ranging from kindergarten to 5th grade chattered excitedly. The upcoming field trip to Eugene's Natural History Museum dominated many conversations, with animated discussions about dinosaur exhibits and planetary displays. "I heard they have a T-Rex skeleton that's as tall as 3 houses," one boy exclaimed, stretching his arms wide to illustrate his point. Frank checked his mirrors one final time, ensuring all his young passengers were seated safely before closing the doors with a pneumatic hiss. He gave a last wave to the remaining parents and pulled away from the curb, turning onto Cedar Lane toward the state highway that wound through the forest, a 25-minute route he had driven twice daily for years. Low clouds hung over the distant hills as the bus rumbled along the familiar road. The local news radio played softly in the front, the weatherman warning of possible fog in mountainous areas. Frank turned up the heat slightly, ensuring his precious cargo stayed comfortable as the landscape transitioned from residential streets to the dense evergreens of Willamette National Forest. At 8:30, Marion Phelps, the secretary at Oak Ridge Elementary School, glanced at the wall clock with a slight frown. Bus 17 was usually punctual, arriving between 8:15 and 8:20 each morning. A 15-minute delay wasn't cause for alarm. Weather conditions or minor traffic issues occasionally slowed the buses down. By 8:45, Marion's concern had deepened enough to warrant action. She dialed Frank's cell phone, listening as it rang several times before going to voicemail. "Frank, it's Marion at the office. Just checking in since you haven't arrived yet. Give me a call when you get this." 10 minutes later, with still no sign of the bus and no return call from Frank, Marion walked briskly to Principal Robert Jenkins' office. "Robert, bus 17 is now 30 minutes late, and Frank isn't answering his phone." Jenkins immediately contacted the school district transportation department, his voice calm but urgent. "This is Principal Jenkins at Oak Ridge Elementary. Bus 17 hasn't arrived, and we can't reach Frank Donovan. What's the protocol here?" By 9:10, with the bus now 40 minutes overdue and no communication from the driver, Jenkins activated the emergency protocol. The school's automated notification system simultaneously sent alerts to the parents of every child assigned to Bus 17. Alert: Bus 17 has not arrived at school. If your child is at home or was transported by other means, please inform the school immediately. In the sterile environment of Oak Ridge Community Hospital, Deborah Williams felt her phone vibrate in her pocket as she assisted with a routine procedure. She initially ignored it, focusing on the task at hand, but when it vibrated 3 more times in rapid succession, she excused herself to check the messages. The color drained from her face as she read the alert, her world instantly shattering around her. Across town in the county courthouse, Mark Thompson was presenting arguments in a property dispute when his phone buzzed. Glancing down discreetly, he saw the school's emergency notification. Without hesitation, he apologized to the judge, abandoned his briefcase, and ran for the exit, repeatedly dialing the school's number, only to hear the continuous busy signal. By 10 o'clock, the elementary school parking lot had transformed into a chaotic scene of hastily parked vehicles and distraught parents demanding answers. Sheriff Mike Callahan arrived with 3 patrol cars, quickly establishing a temporary command center in the school library. Forest Department helicopters took off to survey the bus route from above, while patrol officers began methodically driving every mile of the state highway. "There must be a simple explanation," Sheriff Callahan repeated, attempting to maintain calm among the growing crowd of anxious parents. "Perhaps a mechanical issue in an area without cell coverage. We're checking every possibility." As morning gave way to afternoon with no sign of the yellow bus or its 48 occupants, panic settled over Oak Ridge like a heavy fog. Reporters from Portland and Seattle began arriving, setting up equipment, while FBI agents established a direct hotline for information, and the National Guard mobilized additional search teams. While the first 24 hours of the disappearance came to a close without any concrete clues, an anonymous call reached the FBI hotline. "I saw the school bus that morning. It wasn't following the normal route." FBI agents played the recording of the anonymous call for Sheriff Callahan and search leaders in the pre-dawn hours of the second day. The caller's voice was raspy and deliberately disguised, creating a tense atmosphere in the makeshift command center. Male voice, deliberately hoarse, refused to identify himself, explained Agent Wilson, pausing the playback. But he knew details about the bus route that weren't public knowledge. The early morning briefing was interrupted by the arrival of a helicopter, its rotors slicing through the fog that blanketed Oak Ridge. Special Agent Rebecca Chen, 45 years old with 20 years of experience in missing persons cases, descended from the aircraft with purposeful strides. Her reputation had preceded her, a veteran investigator known for her methodical approach and unrelenting determination. "I need your largest conference room and every piece of data you've collected," Chen announced, dispensing with pleasantries as she entered the town hall building. Within 30 minutes, she had transformed the mayor's conference room into an operational command center with laptops, communication equipment, and a massive digital map projected onto the wall. The illuminated display showed the original bus route highlighted in blue, with potential deviations based on the anonymous tip marked in red. Chen studied the map intently, identifying possible locations where the bus might have left the main highway. "We'll divide the search area into quadrants," she explained to the assembled team of FBI agents, local law enforcement, and Forest Service personnel. Each sector will be systematically covered using grid search patterns. Nothing gets overlooked, not even a candy wrapper or a footprint. Outside the command center, Deborah Williams approached the security checkpoint, still wearing her hospital uniform from the previous day. Dark circles underlined her eyes, evidence of a sleepless night spent alternating between desperate prayers and frantic phone calls. "I need to join a search team," she insisted when an officer attempted to direct her to the family waiting area. "I've hiked these forests since I was a child. I know the terrain better than most of your people." The officer hesitated. "Ma'am, we have trained professionals handling the search." "My daughter is out there," Deborah interrupted, her voice breaking slightly before hardening with resolve. "Either give me a radio and assign me to a team, or I'll go out there myself." Across town at the Oak Ridge Inn, now serving as a support center for the families, Mark Thompson had transformed the hotel's conference room into an information hub. Meticulously organized sheets containing photos, physical descriptions, and distinguishing features of each missing child covered the tables. "We need these distributed to every news outlet, every law enforcement agency, and every hospital within 300 miles, he instructed volunteers, his attorney's precision evident in the systematic approach. "Emily is allergic to penicillin," he added quietly to a volunteer preparing his daughter's information sheet. "Please make sure that's noted prominently." By mid-morning, Agent Chen conducted a comprehensive briefing for the expanded search teams. "We're looking for anything out of place, tire tracks veering off-road, personal items, disturbed vegetation. Each team will maintain radio contact at all times, reporting even the smallest potential clue." As volunteers gathered their equipment, Cynthia Thompson arrived breathlessly at the support center, having driven through the night from Seattle. Her eyes, red from crying, frantically scanned the room until she spotted Mark organizing search materials. Their embrace was both desperate and tender, a moment of shared anguish that required no words. Both collapsed into silent tears, clinging to each other as their last connection to Emily. Outside the school, the governor of Oregon arrived with an entourage of state officials, immediately holding an impromptu press conference. "We've mobilized every available state resource," he announced solemnly to the assembled cameras. "The Oregon State Police, Forest Service, and National Guard are all fully engaged. We will find these children." Throughout the afternoon, high-tech drones equipped with thermal imaging cameras methodically scanned deep ravines and dense forest areas that ground teams couldn't easily access. Technicians monitored real-time footage on screens set up in specialized vans, searching for any heat signature that might indicate human presence. The community's support manifested in countless ways. Elderly couple Robert and Margaret Donovan arrived at the volunteer staging area with dozens of homemade sandwiches and thermoses of hot coffee. "Frank is my brother," Robert explained, his voice thick with emotion as he distributed food to weary searchers. "Been driving that route for nearly 30 years. Those kids are like family to him." Hope surged briefly when Deborah found a child's jacket caught in bushes along a secondary forest trail, only to be dashed when forensic techs determined it had been there for weeks, likely left during a previous school hiking trip. As afternoon faded into evening, trained scent dogs picked up a promising trail, leading search teams to a small rest area off Secondary Road 118. The dogs circled intently before suddenly losing the scent, causing handlers to methodically expand their search perimeter. "The dogs are showing unusual behavior," a handler reported to Chen. "It's as if the scent just vanishes completely." One of the German shepherds began pawing insistently beneath a wooden bench. An agent knelt to investigate, his expression changing as he spotted something partially concealed. "We've got something," he called, signaling for the forensic team. A technician carefully retrieved a smartphone in a protective case, its screen cracked but recognizable as Frank Donovan's cell phone. She bagged it carefully, preserving any potential evidence. "The screen shows an attempted 911 call at 8:12 Wednesday morning," she reported, examining the device through the clear evidence bag. "The call never connected." As Chen examined the recovered cell phone, she noticed something that made her blood run cold. Scratched into the back of the device with what appeared to be a sharp stone were the words, "Not an accident." And beside it, almost imperceptible to anyone who didn't know what to look for, a small drawing she immediately recognized as the signature mark of a criminal group she had spent years investigating. Chen pulled Sheriff Callahan and 2 senior FBI agents into a secluded room at the back of the town hall, away from the bustle of the main command center. She placed Frank's cell phone on the table, pointing to the small symbol scratched beside the ominous message. "This is a territorial mark of the Lone Wolf Cartel," she explained, her voice lowered despite the closed door. "I thought we had dismantled their operations in Oregon 3 years ago." Sheriff Callahan leaned closer, examining the crude etching. "The drug trafficking ring? I thought their leader died in a shootout with federal agents." "That was the official report," Chen replied, her expression grim. "But if this symbol is authentic, it suggests Victor Ramirez might still be alive and has a personal vendetta." Through the blinds, Deborah Williams noticed the unusual movement of additional armed agents arriving discreetly at the command center. When she approached an officer unloading tactical equipment from an unmarked van, her questions were met with evasion. "Just standard reinforcements, ma'am," he replied, avoiding eye contact. "Normal procedure for a search operation of this scale." Deborah's nursing instincts told her something had changed. The atmosphere had shifted from urgent search to something more ominous. At noon, a Kizzy TV reporter broke the news that would transform the investigation's public perception. Exclusive sources confirmed that the missing bus driver's cell phone was recovered, with markings suggesting possible coercion. Police have not officially commented on the development that raises disturbing questions about what really happened to Bus 17. By evening, the elementary school gymnasium had become a powder keg of emotion as families gathered demanding answers. Parents shouted over one another while Sheriff Callahan attempted to maintain order. "We're pursuing every lead methodically," he insisted, raising his hands for quiet. "But I cannot compromise an active investigation by revealing sensitive details that might jeopardize the safety of the children." His words only fueled the growing anxiety. Tony Marquez, owner of the local gas station, stood up angrily, his face flushed. "I've been saying for years that those illegal immigrants camping in the forest are bringing crime to our town," he shouted, gesturing wildly. "Now our children are paying the price while authorities sit on their hands." Several parents murmured in agreement, while others shook their heads in disgust at the accusation. Pastor David Monroe moved quickly to the center of the room, his calming presence momentarily diffusing the tension. "This is exactly what we cannot do," he urged. "We cannot allow fear and suspicion to divide us when we need unity most. Hatred serves only those who wish to harm us." In a separate room filled with evidence boards and timeline charts, Chen and her team meticulously reviewed Frank Donovan's background. 30 years as a school bus driver, spotless record, widowed 5 years ago, regular volunteer at the local Lutheran church, beloved by children and parents alike. Nothing in his history suggests any connection to organized crime, an analyst confirmed, scrolling through financial records. No unusual deposits, no suspicious contacts, no criminal associations. At the bus depot, investigators interviewed Frank's colleagues, searching for any insight into his state of mind before the disappearance. "Frank knew that route like the back of his hand," explained Melinda Tompkins, transportation coordinator for the school district. "He could drive it blindfolded in a snowstorm. He would never deviate unless something forced him to." Back at the support center, Mark and Cynthia Thompson's grief manifested as tension between them. In a hushed but heated exchange in a corner of the hotel lobby, Cynthia's pain spilled over. "You should have driven Emily to school that day," she whispered fiercely, tears streaming down her face. "She asked, Mark. She specifically asked not to take the bus. She had a bad feeling." Mark's face crumpled with guilt. "I had that court appearance. I never imagined—" His justifications died in his throat. The investigation's urgency intensified when the regional meteorologist briefed the search coordinator. pointing to radar maps showing an approaching weather system. "We have approximately 18 hours before this storm hits," she explained. "Once it does, air searches become impossible, and ground operations will be severely hampered by flooding in low-lying areas." This news spurred volunteers to work with renewed desperation, many operating on minimal sleep as they pushed to cover maximum ground before the storm arrived. Deborah Williams refused to leave the forest search area, despite having been on her feet for 12 hours straight, relenting only when a paramedic convinced her she risked collapse. "You can't help Sarah if you're hospitalized from exhaustion," he reasoned, guiding her to a transport vehicle. 4 hours of rest. That's all we ask." As evening approached, Richard Martinez, a local hunter known for his tracking skills, approached the investigation headquarters voluntarily, carrying a tablet. "I've been reviewing old videos from my trail camera," he explained to the officer at the reception desk. "There's something strange I think Agent Chen should see." Within minutes, investigators and several family representatives gathered around a monitor as Martinez played the grainy footage. The video, date-stamped 2 weeks before the disappearance, showed Bus 17 passing normally along a forest road during its morning route. "I don't see anything unusual," Sheriff Callahan started, but Chen raised her hand, pointing to the corner of the screen. "Freeze it and zoom in there," she instructed. The enhanced image revealed a black SUV without visible license plates, partially hidden among trees at the forest edge. A shadowy figure stood beside it, raising what appeared to be binoculars to observe the passing school bus. As the technical team worked to further enhance the image to identify the mysterious observer, the emergency phone line rang. An FBI communications specialist answered, her expression changing rapidly as she listened. "Agent Chen," she called urgently, covering the mouthpiece. "It's the cellular carrier with priority information. One of the missing children's phones was just briefly activated, sending a signal from a location more than 200 miles from Oak Ridge, in the opposite direction from our current search areas." The technicians in the command center frantically traced the cell phone signal, their fingers flying across keyboards as multiple screens displayed mapping coordinates and triangulation data. "Active for only 42 seconds, reported a communications specialist, adjusting her headset. "Approximate location, 8 kilometers north of Bend, in the Deschutes National Forest area." Agent Chen immediately moved to the Central Tactical Station, coordinating the rapid deployment of response teams while studying satellite imagery of the region on her laptop. "Tell the tactical unit to approach with extreme caution," she instructed through her radio. "This could be a trap designed to thin our resources or ambush first responders." The emergency protocol activated instantly. At 3:17 in the morning, an officer knocked urgently on the door of the Holbrook residence. Martha and Stephen Holbrook, who had been attempting to rest on their living room couch, startled awake at the sound. "We've detected a signal from Jason's phone," the officer explained as they opened the door, his expression professionally neutral despite the gravity of the news. "A tactical team is being dispatched to the location immediately." Within 30 minutes, the news had spread among the most involved families. Deborah Williams led a contingent of parents, including the Holbrooks and 5 others, who confronted Chen as she exited a strategy meeting at the town hall. "We're going with you," Deborah stated, her tone leaving no room for negotiation. "These are our children. This isn't a request." Chen assessed the determined faces before her, recognizing that fighting this battle would waste precious time. "You'll remain with the support team at the staging area," she conceded, "but you follow every instruction without question, or you'll be escorted back immediately." A convoy of FBI vehicles and family members' cars departed Oak Ridge within the hour, heading east on Highway 97 toward Bend. The weather had deteriorated significantly, with torrential rain reducing visibility to mere yards. Windshield wipers struggled against the deluge as the vehicles pushed forward through the darkness. Back in Oak Ridge, the original search teams battled increasingly treacherous conditions. Mudslides had already compromised several forest access roads, and high winds bent trees to dangerous angles. By mid-morning, Sheriff Callahan made the difficult but necessary decision. All ground teams return to base immediately, he ordered through the emergency radio channel. We resume when conditions permit. I won't risk losing more lives today. At the Family Support Center, Mark Thompson had initiated his own contingency plan. Through a video call on his laptop, he consulted with a private investigator from Portland, a former FBI agent with a reputation for unorthodox methods. The Bureau has protocols they can't deviate from, Mark explained, rubbing his temples tiredly. We need someone who can think outside the box, follow leads they might consider too tenuous. Near Bend, the tactical team navigated through the sodden forest with practiced precision. Rain-activated night vision equipment provided a ghostly green view of the terrain as they approached the cabin coordinates, communicating through hand signals to maintain absolute silence. The weathered wooden structure stood in a small clearing, no lights visible from within. Team members took strategic positions surrounding the cabin, weapons ready, as the team leader signaled for the final approach. The breach was executed with textbook precision, simultaneous entry through front and rear access points, tactical lights cutting through the darkness inside. Beams of light revealed a single room with dust-covered furniture, cobwebs stretching across corners, and a conspicuous arrangement at the center. On a small table, carefully positioned as if for display, lay Jason Holbrook's cell phone beside his school cap, with the Oak Ridge Elementary logo clearly visible. A folded piece of paper completed the disturbing tableau. When the Holbrooks were permitted to approach the cabin's perimeter, Martha's legs gave way at the sight of her son's possessions being photographed by evidence technicians. Stephen caught her before she hit the ground, calling frantically for medical assistance as she lost consciousness. "We need paramedics here now," he shouted into the rain, cradling his wife's limp form. Agent Chen approached the evidence table wearing latex gloves, carefully unfolding the ordinary printer paper note. Her expression remained professionally neutral, but a muscle tightened in her jaw as she read the typed message. "The game has barely begun. Look where everything begins and ends. Time is running out." Outside, Deborah Williams stood in the pouring rain, her clothes soaked through, confronting Chen as she exited the cabin. "This isn't an investigation," she said, her voice breaking with exhaustion and anger. "It's a human hunt. Someone is playing with our lives, and you're just following their breadcrumb trail." As forensic teams continued processing the scene, a Fox News reporter stood under an umbrella near the police perimeter, broadcasting live to a national audience that had become increasingly captivated by the mystery. 5 days after the mysterious disappearance, authorities appear to be chasing false leads while desperate families consider taking the search into their own hands, she reported grimly. Questions about the competence of the investigation grow as hours turn into days with no sign of the 47 children or their driver. While investigators analyze the cryptic note left in the cabin, a forensic technician examining Jason's phone under ultraviolet light made a startling discovery. He compared the partial fingerprints revealed by the specialized lighting with the FBI database, his eyes widening at the results. "Agent Chen," he called urgently, "you need to see this immediately." The fingerprint match appeared on his screen. Victor Ramirez, the cartel leader officially declared dead 3 years earlier following a violent confrontation with federal agents. The same man Rebecca Chen had helped put in prison, who had sworn vengeance against her as he was led away in chains. The forensic lab's harsh fluorescent lights illuminated the evidence table where the technician confirmed his findings to Chen. 99.7% certainty. These are Victor Ramirez's prints. Chen stared at the mugshot displayed on the system, a Hispanic man of 45 with a distinctive scar running from his left temple to his cheek. Unbidden memories flashed through her mind. The raid 3 years ago, gunfire echoing through an abandoned warehouse, Ramirez's bloody body being carried out on a stretcher, the coroner's confirmation of death. "How is this possible?" she whispered, more to herself than to the technician. Within an hour, Chen had assembled the core investigation team and representatives from the families in the makeshift conference room at the Bend field office. The tension was palpable as she revealed what they'd discovered. "We believe this situation may be more complicated than initially thought," Chen began carefully. "Evidence suggests Victor Ramirez, former leader of the Lone Wolf Cartel, may be involved, and that the target might be me, not your children." Martha Holbrook, still pale from her earlier collapse, slammed her palm against the table. "You're saying my son might be in mortal danger because of some vendetta against you? And you're only telling us this now." The room erupted in angry voices until Deborah Williams unexpectedly spoke up, her calm tone cutting through the chaos. "Assigning blame won't bring our children back," she said firmly. "We need to focus on how this information helps us find them. If this man has a specific motivation, that gives us something to work with." Across the room, FBI analysts were already reviewing old case files from the Lone Wolf operation, spreading photos of Ramirez's known associates across a conference table. Timelines, connection charts, and last known locations were rapidly compiled into a searchable database. Throughout the day, agents knocked on doors across several counties, showing photos to former informants and low-level criminals. "Immunity for information," they offered. "No questions asked if you've seen this man." In a carefully staged CNN interview at the Bend Hotel, Mark and Cynthia Thompson made an emotional appeal. "If this is truly the work of a cartel," Mark stated, his attorney's voice steady despite his exhaustion, "we demand maximum federal intervention, including military forces if necessary." Back in Oak Ridge, Tony Marquez had gathered a group of townspeople in front of the town hall, their anger building with each passing hour. "Close the border!" he shouted through a megaphone. "How many more American children need to disappear before we take real action?" Pastor Monroe, recognizing the dangerous direction this rhetoric was taking, quickly organized members of his congregation to form a human chain between the protesters and the town's Hispanic families, who had gathered in concern. "We will not allow hatred to divide us when we need unity most," he announced, linking arms with community leaders from both sides. In Portland, Dr. Elaine Winters, a linguist specializing in coded communications, analyzed the note in her university office. Her experience with criminal communications had made her an invaluable resource in previous kidnapping cases. "The word choice is deliberate," she explained during a video conference with Chen's team. "Where everything begins and ends is a specific reference, not random phrasing meant to confuse." At the command center, Chen and Deborah studied regional maps spread across a coffee-stained table, searching for any geographical pattern that might match the cryptic clue. "In the context of Oregon," Dr. Winters continued through the video feed, "this phrase could refer to the line that begins and ends the state, the border itself." This insight prompted an immediate redeployment of resources. FBI helicopters, finally able to fly as the storm system moved east, began systematically surveying remote areas near the state boundaries with Washington and California, while ground teams prepared for renewed searches along these perimeters. That evening, alone in her temporary hotel room, Chen studied an old photograph of her team celebrating after Ramirez's capture. The image showed younger agents raising coffee cups in toast, unaware of the years of vengeance that would follow. "How did you survive?" she whispered to the image of Ramirez being led away in handcuffs. "And where are those children?" The fifth day of the investigation had transformed the search entirely. What began as a possible accident or opportunistic crime had evolved into something far more calculated, a vendetta potentially years in the making. At the Emergency Operations Center, digital maps now displayed every property transaction within 200 miles that might have connections to Lone Wolf Cartel shell companies. Surveillance footage from gas stations, toll booths, and traffic cameras was being analyzed for any sign of the missing bus or vehicles that might have been following it. Deborah had organized a group of parents to continue independent searches in Oak Ridge, refusing to accept that the children might be far from where they disappeared. "The FBI can follow their theory," she told the others. "We won't abandon this area until we're certain." As exhaustion finally forced Chen to attempt a brief rest, her phone rang at 14 minutes past 3 in the morning. The display showed a blocked number. When she answered, a voice electronically distorted beyond recognition spoke 7 words that made her blood freeze. "Look where everything began for you," followed by the unmistakable sound of children crying in the background. Chen dropped the phone as if it had burned her, then immediately grabbed it back, signaling frantically to the night shift technician across the hall. The agent understood instantly, activating the emergency trace protocol while Chen put the call on speaker. "Who is this?" she demanded, fighting to keep her voice steady. "Where are the children?" Only static answered her, the call already disconnected. The technician shook his head in frustration. "Too short for a complete trace. We've got a general radius around Klamath Falls, but nothing specific." Chen's mind raced, processing the cryptic message. "Look where everything began for you." Klamath Falls, her first FBI assignment 15 years ago, before the promotions, before the specialized operations against organized crime. She had started her career there working drug trafficking cases along the California border, where she'd first encountered the embryonic Lone Wolf Cartel. "Wake everyone," she ordered, grabbing her jacket, "and get me every file we have on my early cases in Klamath Falls." By dawn, the command center had shifted focus. A large map of Oregon dominated the wall, with red circles marking Oak Ridge, Bend, and now Klamath Falls, creating a disturbing triangle across the state. Sheriff Callahan studied the new theory with skepticism. "You're basing this on a phone call and a hunch?" "My first assignment, 2008, Chen explained, tracing the route south. "I worked a task force against border trafficking. That's where I first started monitoring Lone Wolf's operations before they grew into a major cartel. That's where I first crossed paths with Ramirez." The investigation now split into parallel tracks. Chen would lead a focused team to Klamath Falls, while other agents continued working the original search areas and following up on the evidence from the cabin. In Oak Ridge, Deborah Williams refused to leave the initial search zone. She had organized 20 parents into coordinated search teams, systematically rechecking areas previously cleared by authorities. "The FBI can chase their cartel theory," she told the assembled parents at morning briefing. "We're not abandoning this forest until every inch is searched again." A team from Oregon State University had arrived with ground-penetrating radar equipment, demonstrated to the search coordinators in a clearing near the command post. "This technology can detect cavities, tunnels, or structures up to 30 meters below the surface," explained Dr. Harmon, the geophysicist leading the team. "If the bus somehow ended up underground, in a sinkhole, landslide, or man-made structure, we'll find it." At Bend Memorial Hospital, Cynthia Thompson lay sedated in a private room, her husband Mark keeping silent vigil by her side. The doctors had diagnosed extreme anxiety with panic episodes, recommending observation after she had collapsed during a briefing about the cartel connection. "They're going to find Emily," Mark whispered, holding his wife's limp hand while speaking into his phone with his attorney. "And when they do, we're going to hold the school district accountable for every minute of suffering." Later that morning, at the shores of Odell Lake, the Reeves family gathered for a small private ceremony. Richard and Angela Reeves, parents of 11-year-old twins Jacob and Olivia, had decided they needed a ritual to acknowledge their pain while still maintaining hope. Pastor Monroe stood with them as they released flowers into the still waters. "Lord, we don't understand your ways," he prayed, his voice carrying across the lake, "but we ask for strength in this darkness, and for the safe return of all your children." Meanwhile, the investigation faced a new challenge when an investigative reporter from Oregon Public Broadcasting released allegedly leaked documents online. Records indicate that Frank Donovan made 5 visits to the state penitentiary last year, the reporter stated in his podcast. Sources within the investigation have not clarified the reason for these visits, raising questions about the driver's possible connections. This revelation sparked immediate backlash from Frank's supporters. His brother Richard gave an emotional interview defending Frank's character. He was visiting a former student who made mistakes but whom Frank never gave up on. Richard shouted, visibly distressed, How dare they smear a man who's dedicated his life to those children? By afternoon, Chen and a reduced team had established operations at the FBI's Klamath Falls field office. Walls quickly filled with maps and photographs as they reconnected with local law enforcement who had worked with Chen years earlier. Agents fanned out across the region, interviewing former informants and retired police officers. "Have you seen this man in the last 3 years?" they asked, showing Ramirez's photo. "He might be using a false identity." At the field office, a financial crimes specialist analyzed property records, highlighting suspicious patterns on her computer screen. This particular LLC purchased 5 rural properties between 2015 and 2018, she noted. Classic money laundering structure, consistent with cartel methods. Acting on this intelligence, Chen's team cautiously approached an abandoned farmhouse in the hills outside Klamath Falls. A reconnaissance drone surveyed the property first, confirming no signs of current occupation before agents moved in. The main house was thick with dust, apparently vacant for years, until an agent noticed recent footprints disturbing the layers of grime on the floor. "Someone's been here within the past few weeks," he observed, pointing to the distinct boot prints. Chen discovered a hidden cellar beneath a tattered rug, descending the dark stairs with her weapon drawn. The space below had clearly served as a recent hideout, with food wrappers, makeshift bedding, and most disturbing of all, surveillance photos of school bus number 17 taken weeks before the disappearance. As the team processed this disturbing scene, Chen's radio crackled with an urgent transmission from Oak Ridge. The ground-penetrating radar team had detected something large buried 15 meters deep in a remote area of the forest, a metallic object consistent with the size and shape of a school bus. The image on the radar technician's screen stunned everyone in the makeshift command tent. Clear outlines of a large metallic object, approximately 11 meters long and 2.5 meters wide, buried 15 meters beneath the forest floor. "The density signature is consistent with a vehicle," the technician explained, adjusting the settings to sharpen the image. "The dimensions match a standard school bus." News of the discovery spread through the search teams like wildfire. Deborah Williams was checking a ravine with 2 volunteers when the radio call came through. Her legs gave way beneath her as she processed the information, collapsing to her knees in the damp undergrowth. The volunteers stood awkwardly nearby, uncertain whether to offer comfort or give her space to absorb the potentially devastating news. Within hours, the remote forest location transformed into a hive of frantic activity. Military helicopters hovered overhead, carefully lowering heavy excavation equipment into the newly cleared area. Trees had been hastily felled to create a makeshift landing zone, the sound of chainsaws giving way to the deeper rumble of earth-moving machinery. A team of civil engineers huddled around a laptop with FBI coordinators, pointing to digital simulations of the excavation process. "The soil composition is extremely unstable," explained the lead engineer, her expression grave. "Conventional digging could trigger a collapse that would bury the object even deeper. We need to establish proper containment walls before proceeding." The families of the missing children now faced an agonizing choice. Martha Holbrook organized those who believed the Klamath Falls lead deserved attention, while Deborah remained adamant about staying at the excavation site. "I'll be here when they bring Sarah up," Deborah insisted, her eyes fixed on the massive excavator being assembled. "I need to be the first face she sees." As night fell, powerful floodlights illuminated the excavation site, creating an ethereal dome of light in the dark forest. The intermittent rain had transformed the area into a muddy quagmire, with workers struggling to maintain their footing as they established the complex system of supports necessary for the deep dig. Mark Thompson arrived shortly before midnight, his face haggard from hours at his wife's hospital bedside. He immediately confronted the operation chief, his frustration boiling over. "It's been 8 hours and you've barely scratched the surface," he shouted, gesturing wildly at the preliminary work. "There could be children alive down there, running out of oxygen while you worry about proper procedure." The engineer responded with practiced patience, clearly accustomed to such emotional outbursts. If we rush and the ground collapses, we lose any chance of reaching them. Each centimeter must be stabilized to prevent a catastrophic cave-in. Meanwhile, in Klamath Falls, Chen led a tactical team surrounding a trailer on the outskirts of town. Intelligence from local informants suggested that Michael Ferreira, Ramirez's former lieutenant, had been spotted there within the past week. "Alpha team in position," Chen whispered into her radio. "Execute on my mark." The coordinated breach revealed an empty trailer, but with clear signs of a hasty departure. A half-eaten meal on the table, television still on, warm coffee in a mug. On the wall hung a map of Oregon with red circles marking several locations. Notably, Oak Ridge was not among them. Back at the excavation site, the operation continued through the night and into the following day. By late afternoon, workers had reached 14 meters depth, switching to lighter equipment and sensitive probes to avoid damaging whatever lay beneath. "We're getting close," announced the site supervisor, examining readings from the ground-penetrating sensors. "Everyone not essential to the extraction, please clear the immediate area." A tense hush fell over the assembled crowd as the first patch of yellow metal became visible, confirming what the radar had suggested. They had found a school bus. Sheriff Callahan and a structural engineer were lowered into the excavation on a reinforced platform, carrying powerful flashlights to examine the partially exposed vehicle. Long minutes passed as they conducted their inspection, the silence above broken only by the soft sobbing of parents clutching each other for support. When Callahan's voice finally came through on the radio, the disappointment in his tone was unmistakable. "It's a model from the 1970s, he reported flatly. "Completely empty inside. Appears to have been used as an illegal chemical waste dump and buried decades ago." The revelation hit the assembled families like a physical blow. Some collapsed in tears, others turned away in silent grief, while a few erupted in anger at what felt like a cruel joke of fate. All the hope, all the resources, all the emotional investment of the past 36 hours, wasted on a false lead. As Chen received the update about the excavation failure, she maintained her professional composure, but the strain showed in the tightening of her jaw. Her team had been methodically processing the evidence from the farmhouse cellar, cataloging each item that might provide insight into Ramirez's operations. The momentary quiet was broken by her phone ringing. It was her forensic team in Portland, their excitement palpable even through the speakerphone. "Agent Chen, we've completed the microscopic analysis of the note from the cabin," the lab technician reported. "We found trace amounts of a very specific pollen embedded in the paper fibers. It's exclusive to a rare lichen that grows only in the Deschutes lava cave system." Chen's expression changed as she processed this information. "The lava tubes, that network extends for miles underground." "Exactly," the technician confirmed. "Over 400 interconnected tunnels, many unmapped. Perfect place to hide 48 people for weeks without detection." While the excavation team in Oak Ridge processed their disappointment, a new and potentially more promising lead had emerged. A subterranean labyrinth that could be hiding the missing children beneath the very ground the searchers had been walking over for days. Satellite images of the Deschutes lava caves projected onto the command room wall revealed a natural underground maze of staggering complexity. The specialist pointed to various entrance points, marked in red. More than 80 known entrances, with potentially many more undocumented. It's like searching for a needle in a subterranean haystack. Chen immediately assembled an emergency meeting with experts from the Geological Survey and volunteer spelunkers who knew the cave system intimately. They gathered around a three-dimensional digital map showing the known formations, rotating it to examine various chambers and passageways. "Some of these caverns are large enough to house entire buses," explained Dr. Mitchell, a geologist who had spent decades mapping the volcanic formations. The system was created by ancient lava flows that hardened on the outside, while the molten interior continued flowing, leaving these hollow tubes behind. The tactical implications were immediately apparent. Chen conferred with team leaders, her voice low and urgent. This operation must remain silent. No media coverage, no obvious helicopter activity. If Ramirez or Ferreira realize we've located their hideout, they might panic and harm the hostages. Dividing her available resources presented a significant challenge. The excavation site had already consumed substantial manpower and equipment, and families were emotionally invested in that location despite the disappointing outcome. As Chen coordinated the new search parameters, Deborah Williams burst into the planning room. "My daughter might have been underground for 8 days," she stated, her expression leaving no room for argument. "I'm a nurse trained in emergency response, and I've hiked through those caves since childhood. I'm participating in this search." At the staging area near the primary cave entrance, search teams prepared their specialized equipment. Each member received a helmet with powerful LED lighting, emergency breathing apparatus, and subterranean communication devices designed to work through solid rock. The mood was a mixture of tense anticipation and cautious hope. This lead felt different, more substantial than previous false starts. Meanwhile in Portland, agents interviewed staff at outdoor supply stores, showing Ferreira's photograph. He bought 50 gallons of water, portable generators, non-perishable food, confirmed a clerk at Mountain Outfitters. Enough for a small army, paid cash, seemed in a hurry. As twilight approached, the first team entered the main cave entrance, powerful lights illuminating impressive rock formations that had formed over millennia. Each member carried a tablet with digital maps of known tunnels, with instructions to document any unmapped areas they discovered. "Remember, sound travels strangely in cave systems," whispered the team leader. "Maintain minimal verbal communication once we're beyond the tourist sections." At the first major junction, the team divided into 3 groups, each following a different tunnel, while maintaining contact through low-frequency radio transmitters that could penetrate rock more effectively than standard equipment. Each team also carried advanced atmospheric sensors to monitor oxygen levels and potentially dangerous gases that could accumulate in poorly ventilated chambers. Deborah and 2 specialized agents discovered fresh footprints in the dusty floor of a lateral tunnel, igniting a surge of urgency as they carefully followed the trail deeper into the earth. The prints appeared to be from multiple individuals, some clearly smaller than others, possibly children. In another section of the vast network, Martha Holbrook and her team entered a larger chamber, where they found unmistakable evidence of recent human presence. The remnants of a small fire, food packaging, and water containers arranged in an organized manner. "We've got definitive signs of occupation," Martha reported through her radio. "Recent enough that some of these wrappers still have condensation inside." On the surface, a technical team monitored each group's position on a 3-dimensional digital model, directing them through the labyrinth based on their discoveries and the most efficient search pattern. The map gradually populated with new information as teams reported findings, creating a more complete picture of the extensive underground network. 3 hours into the search, Chen received an urgent radio communication. Chamber D7 shows clear signs of prolonged occupation. Space sufficient to house dozens of people, with primitive but functional living arrangements. Chen instructed the team to approach with extreme caution. "Move silently, weapons ready, hand signals only for the final approach." The team advanced toward the chamber with practiced precision, their movements disciplined and methodical. Upon reaching the entrance, they deployed a fiber optic camera to survey the interior before exposing themselves to potential danger. The chamber was empty of people, but contained disturbing evidence. Frank Donovan's official driver's badge had been attached to a central stalagmite, surrounded by a circle of empty school backpacks. Each bag had a child's name carefully written on it in black marker, arranged in what appeared to be a macabre ritual display. Investigators methodically photographed the scene, documenting each backpack's position and contents, while searching for any clue that might indicate where the children had been taken. The atmosphere was tense with the knowledge that they had found the right location, but had somehow missed their quarry. As they processed the disturbing scene, the underground communications specialist received a fragmented transmission from the surface team that immediately changed the investigation's trajectory. Signals from 3 different cell phones associated with the missing children had been detected, active and moving, approximately 2 kilometers north of their current position, indicating that the hostages might be being transferred at that exact moment. "All teams converge on that signal," Chen commanded through the radio, her voice crisp with urgency. Within seconds, the underground search units were racing through the dark tunnels, guided by the digital map displayed on their tablets. The subterranean maze presented treacherous challenges as teams navigated narrow passages and sudden drops. Specialized agents led the way, using thermal imaging equipment to detect heat signatures ahead while maintaining near-silent movement protocols. Chen personally spearheaded the main unit, her weapon drawn but held low, every sense heightened by the knowledge that they might be minutes away from finding the children. Behind the tactical teams, Deborah and Martha moved with the medical support group, carrying emergency supplies prepared for dehydration, shock, and possible injuries. Despite having no military training, both women showed remarkable composure, their determination to reach their children overriding any fear of the oppressive darkness surrounding them. "Signal strength increasing," reported the communications specialist. 3 phones, moving slowly, approximately 800 meters ahead. The teams advanced through a partially flooded section, cold water reaching mid-calf as they waded through the ancient lava tube. The dampness absorbed sound, creating an eerie silence broken only by the occasional drip from stalactites overhead. Every few minutes, the signal coordinates updated, confirming they were closing the gap. "Latest scan shows a large chamber ahead," whispered the geologist consultant through the tactical frequency. "It's unmarked on official maps, potentially a recent discovery or deliberately kept off records." As they approached the final junction before the target chamber, Chen silently signaled for the teams to deploy in a standard breach formation. Special agents with tactical mirrors carefully extended the devices around corners, providing glimpses of the space ahead without exposing themselves. The sight revealed by the mirrors confirmed their most hopeful expectations. Through the narrow entrance, they could see a large cavern illuminated by generator-powered lights. Inside, approximately 50 people were visible, most of them children sitting in small groups on camping mats. Some were reading books by flashlight, others sleeping huddled together under blankets, all appearing physically intact, though visibly distressed. The underground camp was organized with military precision. Separate sleeping areas, a makeshift kitchen with propane stoves, even a designated play area with books and simple games. 5 armed men patrolled the perimeter, with 2 specifically watching over the children. Frank Donovan was tied to a support column at the far side of the chamber, his face showing evidence of beatings, but his eyes constantly scanning the groups of children, offering reassuring nods whenever a child looked his way. Despite his restraints and obvious injuries, his primary concern remained the well-being of his young charges. On an elevated rock platform overlooking the main area, Victor Ramirez paced while speaking into a satellite phone, his scarred face illuminated by the harsh lights. "I don't care what the media is reporting," he snapped. "The plan continues. The transfer happens tonight." Chen carefully assessed the situation, counting hostiles and noting their positions while formulating the optimal approach. With a series of hand signals, she positioned teams at 3 different entry points, ensuring maximum coverage with minimal risk to the hostages. "On my mark," she whispered into her radio. "Remember, children's safety is absolute priority. 3, 2, 1, execute." The coordinated breach unfolded with practiced precision. Tactical teams entered simultaneously from multiple points, deploying non-lethal flashbang grenades calibrated for the enclosed space. "FBI, on the ground! Protect the children!" they shouted as they swarmed into the cavern. Chaos erupted instantly. Children screamed and scrambled for cover, some running toward the agents while others froze in terror. Frank shouted instructions from his position. "Everyone down! Heads covered, just like we practiced." The response from the armed men was immediate and violent. Ferreira and two associates opened fire, forcing agents to take defensive positions while returning carefully aimed shots. In the confusion, two of the gunmen were quickly neutralized by the tactical team, their weapons secured as they were handcuffed. Amidst the commotion, Ramirez seized the opportunity to grab Sarah Williams and Emily Thompson, who had been kept separate from the other children in a small alcove. Pulling them roughly against him as human shields, he backed toward a narrow side tunnel. "Back off or they die," he shouted, pressing a pistol against Emily's temple while dragging Sarah by her red coat. "Chen, I know you're here. This was always about you." Without hesitation, Chen broke from her position, pursuing Ramirez into the dark tunnel while maintaining radio contact. Suspect has two hostages, moving northeast through unmarked passage, completing primary rescue for the other children before sending backup. The narrow tunnel twisted deeper into the earth, with only the sounds of frightened whimpers and shuffling footsteps guiding Chen's pursuit. The girls' terror was palpable in their muffled cries, but Chen could also hear them stumbling deliberately, slowing Ramirez's escape. After several minutes of pursuit, Chen reached a partially flooded chamber where Ramirez stood with the girls, water reaching their knees. The standoff was illuminated only by their helmet lights, creating dramatic shadows across the rock walls. "It ends here, Ramirez," Chen stated calmly, her weapon steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her. "Let the girls go. This is between us." As the tense confrontation reached its peak, a controlled explosion detonated somewhere in the cave system, part of the tactical team's plan to secure secondary exits. The blast sent tremors through the ancient volcanic tubes, causing rocks to break loose from the ceiling above them. The ground shook violently as larger sections began to collapse, threatening to entomb not only Chen, Ramirez, and the two girls, but potentially blocking the only escape route for everyone still in the main chamber. Chunks of rock crashed around them as the ceiling began to give way. Chen lunged forward instinctively, shoving Sarah and Emily toward a small ridge above the waterline, while Ramirez momentarily lost his balance, his gun hand wavering as he struggled to stay upright in the trembling chamber. "Emergency evacuation," crackled urgent commands through the radio network. "Structural collapse in the eastern sector. All teams initiate immediate withdrawal. Repeat, immediate withdrawal." In the main cavern, tactical agents organized the terrified children into evacuation lines, their training evident in the controlled urgency of their movements. Paramedics lifted the smallest children, while Frank Donovan, despite his injuries and exhaustion, had been quickly freed and now moved among the groups, his familiar presence bringing vital calm. "Remember our rule?" Frank called out, his voice steady despite the dust and debris falling around them. "Hold a friend's hand. Count off by twos. Nobody gets left behind." Chen circled cautiously in the partially flooded chamber, her boots sliding on the slick rock as she faced Ramirez in close quarters combat. Their struggle sent water splashing in all directions, both fighters slipping repeatedly as the ground continued to tremble beneath them. The girls huddled together on the elevated ridge, their faces pale circles in the darkness. Sarah Williams, watching the desperate fight unfold, whispered something to Emily. The terror in her eyes momentarily replaced by determination. "The rock near his foot, help me." Together, the two girls coordinated their movements, pushing a loose stone that rolled down the slight incline and struck Ramirez's ankle, causing him to stumble at a critical moment. On the surface, Deborah and Martha worked frantically alongside dozens of paramedics, preparing thermal blankets and intravenous fluids as the first children began emerging from the cave entrance. Parents who had maintained their vigil rushed forward, forming a human corridor to receive the evacuees, their cries of relief piercing the night as they recognized their children among those being guided to safety. "Jason," Martha Holbrook sobbed as her son appeared, guided by an agent. She swept him into her arms, unable to form words beyond his name. Inside the collapsing tunnel system, the rescue team confronted a partially blocked passage. The structural engineer quickly assessed the creaking ceiling supports. "This won't hold much longer. We have minutes at best, not hours. Everyone moved single file, quickly but carefully. In the flooded chamber, Chen finally gained the upper hand, driving Ramirez face first into the rock wall before securing his wrists with handcuffs. She pressed her radio transmitter. Suspect neutralized, but we're trapped. Main tunnel blocked by collapse. Sarah, still trembling but with surprising steadiness in her voice, approached Chen. In my science book, caves always have air vents. Otherwise, we wouldn't have oxygen down here. Chen immediately understood, scanning the chamber with her tactical light. Brilliant thinking, Sarah. Air current means a way out. Together they traced an almost imperceptible movement of air along the chamber wall, following it to a narrow fissure that seemed to widen further ahead. In the main evacuation route, Frank Donovan stood at the bottleneck where the tunnel had partially collapsed, counting each child that passed through to safety. Despite the medic's attempts to treat his injuries, he waved them away. Are all 47 out? Have you counted? I need to be certain. The paramedic nodded. All accounted for except the 2 with Agent Chen. You're the last adult. Frank allowed himself to be guided through the narrowing passage just as the final support beams gave way, sealing the tunnel behind him in a cloud of dust and debris. After 20 tense minutes of careful navigation through the air vent passage, a cheer erupted from the surface team as Chen emerged from a secondary cave opening, carrying Emily, while Sarah walked unsteadily beside her. All 3 were covered in mud, but wonderfully, miraculously alive. The reunion that followed transcended words. Deborah ran to Sarah, enveloping her in a desperate embrace that communicated everything words could not. Nearby, Cynthia Thompson, who had discharged herself from the hospital against medical advice, collapsed to her knees as Emily was placed in her arms, Mark falling beside them to complete their family circle. As dawn broke over the rescue site, the last children were being examined in medical tents, while Ramirez was escorted to an armored transport vehicle under heavy guard. Chen stood apart from the celebrations, watching the community reunite, her professional composure finally beginning to crack as the magnitude of what they'd accomplished sank in. 1 month later, Oak Ridge Elementary School hosted a special ceremony. All 47 children attended, wearing colorful T-shirts emblazoned with cave survivors across the front. Many still attended therapy sessions, but all showed signs of healing. Frank Donovan, recognized as a hero for maintaining order and comfort during their captivity, received a Medal of Honor from the governor, his modest smile betraying embarrassment at the attention. Deborah Williams and Cynthia Thompson, once divided by their different approaches to the crisis, had formed the Oak Ridge Child Safety Foundation, dedicated to improving school transportation security and psychological support for traumatized children. Sarah now eagerly explained cave air currents to classmates, her ordeal having sparked an interest in geology and speleology. Emily had cautiously returned to ballet, her movements gradually regaining their former grace. The community itself had transformed, more united, more vigilant, but also more grateful for each ordinary day, each routine school bus return. Chen visited quietly before her next assignment, watching from a distance as the children played at recess, carrying both the weight and gratitude of having brought them back to the light. As Chen prepared to leave Oak Ridge, her phone vibrated with a message from an unknown number. A photo of another school bus in a different town, with a simple phrase, "Some games never really end."